Hello, welcome to our Entity Framework and LINQ tutorial where I, Mustafa, will cover Entity Framework and Kevin will cover LINQ. So the agenda for today is I'll give an overview of our third-year project, Peer Assessment Simplified System, or PASS. I'll define Entity Framework, how to use it, then Kevin will define LINQ, give an overview of LINQ syntax, and delve into some Lambda functions, and we'll have a conclusion at the end. So what is PASS? It's a system that allows teachers to set up class evaluations using their rubrics. PASS uses Entity Framework to manage its data between the database and the application. PASS allows teachers to schedule these evaluations at a certain time, and it also allows students to evaluate one another and the teacher to retrieve all those marks and have it displayed in an easy-to-read report. Now, Entity Framework is a framework introduced by Microsoft that makes it much easier to make calls to the database and retrieve and to do CRUD operations on the database for an application. It uses entity objects, which are somewhat like classes, but they are more specialized for the purpose of representing tables. They have constraints, they can have relationships between one another, and they are used to make sure that the data is true to what it's supposed to be. Entity Framework has three approaches. We have code first, database first, and model first. PASS used mostly code first, and it interfaced with CSAdmin, which is used to manage its logins using database first. But mostly we use code first, which is laying out all the model classes in an actual code and writing out the attributes that would be in a database table and writing out the relationships between the database tables and the model class. Database first is pretty much creating the database and then importing it using Server Explorer to create the entity objects. And then model first is using Visual Studio's modeling tool to create your database. So we use code first in PASS. Now I'm going to show you PASS's project structure. Let me just close all these. We separated PASS into two projects. The PASS project here is the front-facing one, which is all the GUI stuff. And then we have the business business project, which is PASS entity, which holds all the model classes, all the data, the business classes, and all that. Now, to install Entity Framework, you see in the references here that we have Entity Framework installed. Now, we just go to Project and into the Manage NuGet packages, and we can see that Entity Framework is installed. So if you ever want to install Entity Framework, all you have to do is use NuGet's package manager, browse, search up Entity Framework, and then we can install it, but I'm not going to uninstall it right now. So I'll give you an example of what Entity Framework is, like of a code snippet that uses Entity Framework. In our BLL here, let me go here, rubric BL. So for model first, we laid out all our, these are supposed to represent tables as assessment, assessment team, assessment user, and then PASS context is used to aggregate all the tables, and it'll allow us to connect to Entity Framework. So as you see here in the rubric business layer class, we initialize a PASS context object, and then we use all the classes here that are already loaded in with data to create our CRUD operations or anything we need for business-wise. So, for example, the create rubric for a teacher takes in teacher ID, title of a rubric, and a rubric type. Now we initialize a new rubric class based on the classes laid out here. And then we give it a title, give it all its attributes that we need. And then we simply, instead of having to create an update, no, instead of having to use a create statement, a create SQL statement, we just access the entity framework pass context class here, and then we add it to the rubrics DB set, which we created, and then we save the changes, and it will accordingly send out the SQL statements to the database. So that is pretty much a nutshell of what Entity Framework is used for and how it's laid out when you use code first. Now I'm going to pass it along to Kevin, and he'll go over LINQ.
Instead of writing SQL to query the databases, say in a .NET system, we can use the Microsoft language LINQ, which expresses queries directly in languages such as C# and VB. You can use the same basic coding patterns to query and transform data in XML documents, SQL databases, .NET collections, and much more. We're going to use pass as context for examples. Here we have a method that needs to retrieve a team object by an ID. The first half of the method is the creation part of the query. The second half is the actual execution and retrieval of the query. Only when query.first is called is the database queried. Similar to an SQL select statement, with LINQ, we must identify the from, where, and select clauses. The from clause specifies the data source, in our case teams table of the past database. The where clause applies the filter, and the select specifies the type of the returned elements. LINQ will transform this C# code into a proper SQL statement, retrieve the data, and transform it to match the team object. Like SQL, LINQ permits coding other functions such as order by and group. Usually used for more complex queries, Lambda can be used to write local functions that can be passed as arguments or returned as the value of function calls. Lambda expressions are particularly helpful for writing LINQ query expressions. The Lambda operation looks like this. In this example, we use a lambda expression in our LINQ statement. Lambda uses type inference, meaning you often do not have to specify a type for the input parameters. In the order by clause, we create an anonymous function, essentially telling the query that for each criterion returned from the LINQ statement, use its title as the order. LINQ and lambda notations essentially produce the same content. It's just different in syntax. To conclude, Entity Framework can be used to easily connect to your data tables through entity objects. LINQ and Lambda can easily query those created entity objects. For more information on these topics, please visit the official Microsoft documentation pages.